The royal court of the Varelian Empire was a place where every step, every breath, every word mattered. One wrong move could mean exile or worse. The air smelled faintly of burning incense, and gold pillars rose like trees toward a ceiling, painted with scenes of ancient victories. Jace Arden, a human envoy from Earth, stood in the center of the circular chamber. Around him, the alien nobles sat in tiered seats, their jeweled robes catching the light. Most of them stared at him with thinly veiled dislike. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, and many saw them as reckless troublemakers. On the highest platform sat Princess Solara Virel, heir to the throne. She was known throughout the Empire for her cold beauty-silver skin like moonlight, eyes the deep green of ocean storms, and a voice sharp enough to cut glass. She had faced generals, without blinking, silenced entire rooms with a single raised brow. No one dared speak to her without permission. Today, Jace had been summoned to answer for a breach of etiquette during trade negotiations. He had interrupted a noble. In Virelian culture, this was nearly a crime. The air was thick with tension as the court waited for the punishment to be announced. Solara leaned forward on her throne, her crown glinting. "Human," she said, her voice like ice sliding across marble. "You stand accused of disrespecting the council. Do you deny it?" Jace's heart pounded. Every instinct told him to speak carefully, to bow, to apologize. But he didn't. Instead, he met her gaze directly, something no alien in the chamber dared to do. "I don't deny speaking," he said, his voice steady. "But I wasn't being disrespectful. I was being honest." Gasps rippled through the nobles. Solara tilted her head, curious despite herself. "Honest? In what way?" The room went silent. Dozens of eyes bored into him. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were waiting. Jace took a slow breath, then smiled faintly. "I was looking at you," he said, "and I thought, you're beautiful." The effect was instant. Solara's lips parted, her eyes widening ever so slightly. For the first time in years, she was caught off guard. The chamber erupted angry shouts, sharp whispers, the rustle of silk as nobles leaned toward one another. Some were outraged, others astonished. No one had ever spoken to the princess like that, not in public, and certainly not a human. Solara did not move. She did not speak. She simply stared at him, as if trying to understand what had just happened. The chief steward, a tall alien with a golden neck crest, stepped forward in outrage. "This is insolence of the highest order. Guards, remove him. Stop." The single word cut through the noise like a blade. It had come from the princess. Every voice fell silent. Solara's gaze was still locked on Jace. Her expression was unreadable, but there was no anger in her eyes, only something strange, something searching. After a moment, she leaned back in her throne. "This session is over," she said quietly. "The human stays." The nobles' lips stunned, but none dared argue. The guard stepped back. Jace exhaled slowly. He had no idea if he had just saved himself or sealed his fate. Solara rose from her throne, her long silver gown flowing around her like liquid light. She descended the steps slowly, every movement graceful, until she stood only a few feet from him. "You speak boldly for someone so new to this galaxy," she said softly. "And you listen longer than I expected," Jace replied. For a heartbeat, something flickered across her face amusement. Interest? He couldn't tell. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her attendants following quickly. The court began to dissolve into murmurs again. Jace stood alone in the center of the chamber, his pulse still hammering. He had come here prepared for a trial, and somehow walked away with something else entirely. High above, in the shadows of the balcony, a pair of unseen eyes watched the scene with quiet interest. They had just found a new weakness in the Princess of the Varelian Empire. And it was human. Asterisk. The great doors of the Varelian court closed with a deep echo, sealing the chamber behind them. Jace could still feel the weight of 100 eyes on his back, even after the nobles were gone. He had no idea whether he had just made the boldest move of his life, or the most dangerous. 2 armored guards flanked him as they led him down the long hall toward the envoy quarters. Their boots clicked sharply against the black marble floor. Neither spoke, but their stiff posture made it clear they didn't like him. The air in the hallway was colder than in the court, and the walls were lined with tall windows showing the endless city beyond spires of silver and crystal stretching into the clouds. Halfway to his quarters, a third figure appeared in the corridor. It was the chief steward, his golden neck crest stiff with disapproval. He stopped in front of Jace, his narrow eyes glinting. "You have no idea the trouble you've caused, human," the steward said quietly. "Your words could be seen as an attempt to influence the royal heir. That is forbidden." Jace kept his voice calm. "I wasn't trying to influence her. I told the truth." The steward's eyes narrowed further. "The truth is dangerous." Here, without another word, he turned and vanished into a side hall, leaving the tension behind him like a trail. That night, Jace lay awake in his quarters, the alien sky glowing faintly outside his window. He replayed the moment over and over, the princess's eyes widening, the stunned silence that had followed. Why hadn't she punished him? Why had she stopped the guards? The next morning, his answer arrived. 2 guards entered his room without knocking. One of them held a scroll sealed with the royal crest. "By order of Princess Solara Virel," the guard said. "You are to attend her in the royal gardens at midday." Jace blinked. "Is this a meeting?" The guard gave a curt nod. "A private audience." Private? That word alone was enough to set the entire palace buzzing with rumors that the royal gardens were unlike anything Jace had seen. Tall trees with silver leaves swayed in the warm breeze, and flowers glowed faintly in the shade, their petals shimmering like tiny stars. A narrow stream wound between crystal bridges, the water singing softly as it flowed. Princess Solara stood at the edge of the stream, her back to him. She wore no crown today, only a light gown of pale blue silk. 2 attendants stood far behind her, close enough to serve, but far enough to give space. Jace approached carefully. "Your Highness." She turned slowly, her expression calm but unreadable. For a long moment, she simply studied him. "You spoke to me yesterday as no one has ever dared," she said at last. "Why?" Jace considered his words. "Because in my culture, when we see something beautiful, we say it. Not to gain power, not to manipulate, just because it's true." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And you think I am beautiful?" "I don't think," he said with a faint smile. "I know." Solara looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the silver-leafed trees. In this court, beauty is a weapon. It is armor. It is used to control others, not to be acknowledged. "Maybe that's the problem," Jace said quietly. "No one tells you what they really think." For the first time, she allowed a small smile to touch her lips, but only for a second. Then her expression hardened again. "You speak boldly, human. But be careful. The court will not forgive easily." As they spoke, Solara's eyes flickered briefly toward a shadowed archway across the garden. Jace followed her gaze and caught the faintest movement, someone watching them, then slipping away. He didn't mention it. Not yet. Their meeting ended with no promises, no orders, only a strange, unspoken understanding. But as Jace walked away, he knew one thing. The princess hadn't forgotten his words, and someone else in the palace hadn't either. Asterisk. 2 days passed after the meeting in the royal gardens. 2 days of tense whispers in the palace corridors. 2 days of Jace feeling every glance, every pause in conversation when he entered a room. The alien nobles no longer looked at him like he was simply an outsider. They looked at him like he was dangerous. It was early morning when the message came. A palace courier, young, nervous, eyes flicking to the shadows, arrived at Jace's quarters with a small, silver data slate. He handed it over without a word and left as quickly as he'd come. Jace tapped the screen. A single line appeared. Come to the East Library at the 7th bell. Tell no one. SVSV could only be Solara Virel. The East Library was a place few humans were allowed to enter. It was older than most of the city, its walls lined with shelves of crystal tablets, memory stones, and long rolls of shimmering script. Jace stepped inside. It was quiet, except for the soft hiss of an automated archivist gliding down an aisle. Solara was waiting near a tall window, sunlight spilling over her silver skin. She was wearing a simple white robe, her crown gone, her hair unbound. Without the layers of royal ceremony, she looked almost human in her expression. You came, she said softly. You asked? Jace replied. Solara turned toward the shelves. I wanted you to see something. She pulled out a crystal tablet, its surface glowing faintly, and placed it in his hands. As he looked, it showed an image not of battles or conquests, but of a young Solara standing beside her mother, the late Empress. Both were smiling in a way Jace had never seen from her. My mother believed in speaking truth without fear, Solara said quietly. The court called her weak for it, and when she died, I learned to be silent. Jace understood. And then I came along and ruined that silence. Her lips curved just slightly. Perhaps. Before he could answer, a sudden sound broke the moment, a faint clink of metal, almost like a boot scraping stone. Solara's eyes flicked toward the far. Shelves.jac. E moved instinctively, stepping in front of her. Someone's here. From between the shelves, a figure in dark robes slipped into view. The face was hidden, but in their hand glinted the thin edge of a blade, not the kind for ceremony, but for killing. In the library, the silence was broken by the hum of the blade's energy field. The assassin lunged. Jace reacted without thinking, grabbing a heavy crystal tablet from the nearest shelf and swinging it hard. It connected with the attacker's arm, sending the blade clattering across the marble floor. Solara moved fast for a royal. She kicked the weapon away and shouted an order in her own language. Guards came running within seconds, but the attacker had already vanished into the maze of shelves. When the guards searched, they found nothing but the faint shimmer of a cloak dissolving in the air. This was not random, Solara said, her voice low but steady. Someone knew you would be here with me. Jace frowned. Then you can't trust anyone in the court. Her eyes met his. Perhaps, but I can trust you, can't I, human? Jace didn't hesitate. Yes. They left the library together, the crystal tablet still in his hands. The image of the smiling young Solara burned into his mind. He didn't know if the assassin had been after him, or both, but one thing was certain. Whatever game the palace was playing, it had just turned deadly. The palace was never truly quiet. Even in the early hours, there was always the sound of footsteps on marble, the hum of distant skyships, and the low murmur of voices behind closed doors. But after the attack in the library, the sound had changed. The whispers were sharper now. The glances toward Jace were longer, and colder. Rumors spread like fire. Some claimed the human had staged the attack to win Solara's trust. Others said the princess had broken centuries of tradition by meeting a human in secret. A few whispered something even more dangerous, that the heir to the Virelian throne had fallen under human influence. Jace ignored the stares as best he could. but he could feel the tension building like a storm. 3 days later, Solara called for him again, this time in her private war chamber. The room was circular, its walls covered in star maps and glowing tactical displays. Solara stood at the center table, her hands resting on a holographic map of the Empire. She didn't look up when he entered. "They're moving against me," she said quietly. Jace stepped closer. "Who?" "My cousin, Lord Verne. He's been gathering the outer houses under his banner for months. Your arrival and your words in the court have given him the excuse he needed." "What excuse?" "That I am unfit to rule." She looked up at him, then, her eyes hard. "That I have been compromised by an alien." Jace studied the map. Several border systems were marked in red. "These are troop movements?" "Yes," she said. "Verne is calling it order security, but it is the beginning of rebellion. If I move against him openly, I will look like a tyrant. If I do nothing, he will take more. And if you prove you have loyal allies?" Jace asked. Solara raised a brow. "Are you offering yourself, human?" He smiled faintly. "I'm saying I know a few things about dealing with people who want you gone." Before she could respond, the doors slammed open and the chief steward entered, his golden neck crest rigid with fury. "Your Highness," he said sharply, "Lord Verne has petitioned the High Council to remove you from succession. He claims you endanger the stability of the Empire." Solara's jaw tightened. "And what proof does he offer?" The steward hesitated too long. "Witnesses," he said finally. "Servants who claim to have seen you alone with a human. In the gardens, in the library." Jace's eyes narrowed. "Those weren't accidents, were they? Someone's been watching us the whole time." The steward shot him a cold look. "The council meets at dawn tomorrow. They will expect your defense, Princess." When the steward left, Solara exhaled slowly. For the first time, Jace saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You could distance yourself from me," he said quietly. "Tell them I was just another envoy, that I meant nothing." Her gaze locked on him. "And give them exactly what they want." "No, Jace Arden, they will not take my crown, and they will not take the truth of what I choose." That night, the city outside the palace glowed under its twin moons. From Solara's balcony, the tower shimmered like silver flames. Jace stood beside her, the cool wind carrying the faint hum of the distant star docks. "They will come for you," he said. "Maybe not tonight, but soon." Solara turned to face him. "Let them come. I will not be ruled by fear. Not again." For a moment, there was no crown between them. No court, no galaxy, just the strange, fragile bond they had begun to build. But far below, in the shadowed streets, cloaked figures were already moving toward the palace. And this time, they were not coming for whispers or rumors. They were coming for blood. Asterisk. The attack came just before dawn. Jace was woken by the sound of shouting in the palace corridors, short, clipped orders in the Varelian tongue. Then came the metallic crack of weapons fire. He grabbed his jacket and stepped into the hallway, only to be met by a young palace guard sprinting toward him. There inside, the guard barked. "Outer house mercenaries disguised as traders. They've breached the south wing." Jace didn't hesitate. "Where's the princess?" The guard pointed toward the upper towers. "In her command chamber, but Jace was already moving. The palace was chaos. Servants fled down narrow passages, guards clashed with armored intruders. The mercenaries fought with brutal efficiency, clearly trained for this moment. There, armor was marked with the sigil of Lord Verne Solara's cousin. Jace fought his way up the marble staircases, grabbing a fallen guard's stunned staff as he went. He had no armor, no real weapon, but he had the advantage of speed and a clear goal. He burst into the command chamber to find Solara surrounded by her personal guard. the holographic war table still glowing in the center of the room. "Jace!" she exclaimed, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You shouldn't be here." "Too late for that," he said. Moving to her side, an explosion rocked the chamber, sending shards of crystal raining from the ceiling. A section of the wall caved inward, and 3 mercenaries stormed in, their rifles raised. Solara's guards opened fire, the air filling with the hiss of plasma bolts. 1 mercenary went down, but the other 2 pressed forward. Jace swung the stun staff, knocking the rifle from one attacker's hands, then driving his shoulder into the other. They crashed against the war table, scattering holograms in a shower of light. Solara herself fought with a ceremonial blade, her movements sharp and precise. She was no sheltered royal. She had been trained for battle since childhood. When the last mercenary in the room fell, Solara turned to Jace, her breath quick but controlled. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Yeah," he replied, gripping the staff, "but I wasn't going to let you stand here alone." More shouts echoed from the hall. The fight wasn't over. Solara glanced at the war table and tapped a glowing star sector. "If we hold the throne chamber, the rest of the palace will rally. We can trap them inside their own entry point." Jace grinned. "Sounds like a plan. Lead the way." They moved quickly, cutting through side corridors to avoid the main battle. Along the way, Jace covered her back, taking down 2 mercenaries who tried to flank them. It was strange. He had known her for only a short time, yet their movements already felt coordinated. She anticipated his steps. He read her signals without a word. By the time they reached the throne chamber, a squad of loyal guards was already holding the doors against a final wave of attackers. Solara stepped forward, rallying them with a sharp command in her own language. The sight of their princess, armed and ready, seemed to ignite something in the defenders. Their lines held firm. Jace joined the front, deflecting strikes and pushing back enemies with the stun staff. Beside him, Solara fought with a determination that left no doubt. This was her throne, her people, and she would not surrender them. At last, the final mercenary dropped his weapon and fled toward the shattered south wing. The palace was safe. For now. As the guards began securing the area, Solara turned to Jace. Her silver skin was streaked with dust, her hair slightly loose from the fight, but her eyes burned with a strange light. "You fight as if you've always been here," she said quietly. "And you command like someone who doesn't need saving," he replied. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost." "What's that?" "An ally I can trust without question." Before Jace could answer, the chief steward arrived with grim news. "Your Highness," he said, bowing low, "Lord Verne has declared open rebellion. He marches on the capital with an entire fleet." Solara's gaze hardened. "Then we will be ready for him." And for the first time, she didn't just mean herself. She meant them. The throne chamber was silent. Silent, not because no one was speaking, but because everyone was waiting. Representatives from every house in the Varelian Empire stood in the vast hall, their jeweled robes catching the glow of the high crystal windows. The floor was a perfect circle of black marble, the center reserved for the heir to the throne. And in that circle stood Princess Solara Virel, and beside her, the lone human who had changed everything. At the far end of the hall, the tall Golden. Doors swung open. Lord Verne entered, flanked by his armored guard. He was broad-shouldered, with the cold smile of someone certain of victory. His eyes flicked to Jace for a fraction of a second, sharp, measuring, dangerous, before settling on Solara. "Cousin," Verne said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "You've brought shame to our bloodline, and today the council will strip you of your crown." A murmur rippled through the nobles. Solara did not bow. "If I have shamed the Empire," she said evenly. It is because I refuse to live. By fear. Vern's smile widened. Or perhaps because you have let a human worm his way into your court, and into you. Gasps. Whispers. Some faces turned toward Jace, their eyes full of accusation. Solara stepped forward. If you accuse. Do it plainly, Vern. Very well. He raised his voice. I accuse you of breaking tradition, of showing weakness, of letting an alien influence the rule of our people. If the council agrees, you will step aside, and I will take your place. The chief steward moved to the center, ready to begin. The vote. But before he could speak, Solara lifted her hand. No, she said. This will not be decided in whispers or numbers. It will be decided in truth. She turned slowly, her eyes sweeping across every noble present. You call it weakness to hear another's words without fear. You call it shame to see worth beyond bloodlines, but I call it strength. Her gaze found Jace. When a human told me I was beautiful, he was not flattering a crown. He was speaking to me. No one in this chamber had ever done that, not in years. And it reminded me, she looked back at the council, that I am more than a title you can control. Vern's jaw tightened. Empty words. The council will? But Solara cut him off with a voice like steel. The council will see my choice. She stepped to Jace's side. In front of every noble, every rival, she took his hand. I choose an ally who stands in battle when others flee. I choose someone who speaks truth, even when it's dangerous. I choose a friend who made me remember I am alive. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Then, one by one, some of the nobles began to bow not to Vern, but to Solara. First the minor houses, then several of the greater houses. The sound of fabric against marble grew until it filled the hall. Vern's face darkened. He knew. The moment had slipped beyond his reach. You'll regret this, Solara, he said quietly. The galaxy is watching. She met his gaze without blinking. Good, let them. By formal decree of the council, now firmly in her favor, Lord Vern was stripped of command and ordered back to his estates. His rebellion had ended without a battle, and the news would travel across the Empire within hours. Later, as the hall emptied, Solara and Jace stood alone in the throne chamber. You risked everything? He said quietly. She smiled faintly. And yet, I gained something more. What's that? Her hand tightened around his. Someone who reminds me to speak. Jace grinned. Still beautiful, by the way. This time, Solara didn't forget how to answer. She leaned closer and whispered, "And you're still mine." That day, the story spread not just through the palace, but across the empire, of the princess who defied tradition, silenced her enemies, and stood beside a human in full view of the galaxy. Some called it scandal. Some called it weakness. But others called it the beginning of a new kind of strength. Asterisk.